Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be taking a look at this AST Ascentia 950N laptop. Now this is a cool little laptop from 1995 featuring an Intel Pentium 90 MHz CPU. And in 1995 this would have set you back $5,500 US. But first, a word from our sponsor, and that's PCBWay, a full-feature custom PCB prototyping service. If you need PCB assembly, SMD stencils, or flexible PCB manufacturing, PCBWay has got you covered. Shipping to more than 170 countries worldwide, processing thousands of PCB orders a day, PCBWay combines excellent pricing with customer service. Check out their website to get a quote or get in touch with their support staff if you have any more detailed questions. And now back to the video. Now I did put this laptop up for sale and somebody did buy it, so I only have it for a couple of hours, but I still wanted to make a video on it. Now we obviously have a dead battery, so the computer has lost its setup configuration. But other than that, the laptop seems to be working fine. We see the AST Ascentia 950N splash screen. We hear the beep, so we have post. The computer launches into MS-DOS. It is testing its extended memory, and then it goes off to launch into Windows 3.11. We also see it initializing a Western Digital driver, probably allowing Windows for Workgroups to access the disk in 32-bit mode. We see the beautiful AST computer Ascentia background, and it launches into Windows. Just look at this beautiful Microsoft Office splash screen. Pretty decent resolution on this screen. Definitely not your standard 640 by 480. So I'm guessing this is a pretty standard factory install from AST, judging by the background, the fact that the correct drivers are installed. We have your typical set of Office-related software like Microsoft Works version 3.0 installed. And we also have the regular Office with Microsoft Word. I think it's going to be 6.0 from the mid-90s. I mean, I've seen this splash screen so many times when I was young. And it's always a blast to see this on old computers, just opening up these old applications and revisiting these really cool looking splash screens. Now the Ascentia 950N was really proud of its graphics capabilities with its active TFT matrix color display featuring an 800 by 600 resolution and a fast Intel Pentium CPU from 75 MHz all the way up to 120 MHz. Not bad for the mid-90s. So yeah, pretty capable multimedia laptop. Nice little form factor. And again here, really showing off that TFT active matrix color screen for the price of a dual scan screen. So yeah, pretty nice little laptop here. And another cool feature this laptop had is that it had a sound card on board. But not just any sound card. This laptop came with a Sound Blaster Vibra 16 sound card, which is pretty nice. So yeah, obviously you had a whole range of options from Pentium 75 all the way up to 120 MHz with various hard disk options. So yeah, pretty cool machine from AST Computer. So in the control panel, you can see that we have audio drivers installed. So if I go to the sound mapper here, we see that we have a Sound Blaster 16 wave out and wave in. So yeah, that's pretty nice. The fact that this laptop has an actual Creative Sound Blaster 16 chip on board. So yeah, here we can see the Creative Sound Blaster 16 auxiliary audio wave and MIDI drivers. Now this laptop also has the correct video drivers installed, a Cirrus Logic chipset. Obviously I have it hooked up to an external monitor right now, but the LCD display can take up a resolution of 800 by 600 and the external display can go all the way up to 1280 by 1024. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to spend with this laptop, so I was able to use the machine briefly, but I didn't have the time to create a full backup, which is really a shame because I have another AST laptop just like this one, which isn't factory installed, but Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have the time. This even had this make your disks now AST setup utility. So yeah, really stupid of me that I didn't take the time to do a proper backup. The new owner unfortunately already formatted the hard drive, so yeah, that's a bit of a shame. One cool feature of this laptop also is that it has this built-in BIOS that you can access from MS-DOS, from Windows, by using a keyboard shortcut, giving you all kinds of options that you can modify here. Some of those obviously require a restart, but the fact that you can enter this BIOS from MS-DOS or Windows is pretty cool. So yeah, other than that, we have a pretty nice keyboard. We have this pointer device at the center. We have the left and the right mouse button. Some LEDs. On the side here we have the power input, we have a headphone jack, we have a lock for the battery, we have a missing hinge here, and you can also see that this came from the Ministry of Finance, as for some strange reason the Ministry of Finance in Belgium decides to really brand their hardware with this MinFin logo scorched into the case. On the back here we have an expansion slot, and behind this little panel here we have external video, parallel serial, and a PS2 mouse connector. On the other side we have a 3.5-inch disk drive, 1.44 megs. We also have two PCMCIe slots here, so you can add like a networking card or a modem or some external storage. We have the microphone headphone jack and an infrared port. Now the PC does have some quirks. Sometimes the display is a little bit offset to the left, so when you boot you kind of miss some part of the screen. Now this is typically fixed by moving the hinge a little bit, so probably some kind of connector issue, but it's easily fixed just by wiggling the display a bit and everything just kind of falls into place. Now obviously the CMOS settings have been lost over the years, but I mean that's an easy fix. Now, other than that, I also noticed, at least on one occasion, that the machine was starting and it was having some issues with the extended memory, and it only found 640 kilobytes of conventional memory and no extended memory, making it impossible to start Windows. And a final issue that I noticed is that although the disk drive seems to work fine, we can pull up directory listings of floppies, we can copy floppies to the hard drive, everything was working fine, except for the fact that I wasn't able to write something to a floppy drive, despite the floppy drive being not write protected. So some issue with the disk drive that we need to take a look at. But now we're not here to talk about this particular laptop, because I have an identical one which has a little bit more of an issue, in the sense that it doesn't really want to start. Well, it actually starts like 1 out of 20 times, but most of the time it just stays dead. It also has some cosmetic issues here on the hinges, which have started to crack, so that's not good. And this is obviously going to get even worse the more we open and close the laptop. As you can see here on the other side, it has also started to crack the plastic here around the hinge. So yeah, pretty annoying. So yeah, as the laptop on the left was off to its new owner, I was stuck with the laptop on the right. I even didn't have time to compare hardware parts, as I was only stuck with this one. So I decided to start disassembling the computer, starting with this little front thing here, which is the disk drive. I thought I would be able to get the disk drive out just by unscrewing these 4 screws here, but that wasn't the case. It was kind of stuck inside its case. So yeah, I thought for some reason perhaps it was the hard drive or something which was holding it in place. So I started removing that, but it wouldn't budge. But upon closer inspection here, I noticed that there was still a flat cable attached to the motherboard from the disk drive, so that was probably causing it to be held into place. So yeah, time to unscrew some more screws to get to the internals of this laptop, and that's just one of the things that I really don't like on these laptops. There are just too many screws, too many things to unscrew, to detach. You have lots of components. But finally, my patience was rewarded and I was able to open up the keyboard here and have a good look at the disk drive, which was in fact held into place by this flat cable on the motherboard. We also have 3 additional flat cables that go into the keyboard that we will need to remove. And removing these flat cables is pretty annoying. Also, I wouldn't recommend really using a screwdriver like I'm doing here. So this is definitely a bad idea, as you can slip and cut into the flat cable. So perhaps it's just best to use your fingers or fingernails to kind of lift up these brackets. Now, to get the other 3 flat cables out, we first need to remove this panel here so that we have a little more room to work with. And here I'm just going to use my fingernails to kind of wiggle these connectors open. Probably a little bit safer than using a screwdriver, and then really gently try to open up these connectors so that you can pull the flat cables out safely. So yeah, next up is trying to remove this panel here, which is held together with a couple of screws. So yeah, turn the laptop upside down and went for some screw hunting here. There was one here beneath this little feet that I had to remove. Some screws here at the corner bottom of the laptop that need to be removed. A couple of more screws here that thought they found a good hiding place behind these little plastic bits here. And then there's always this one screw that you cannot find, because I was unable to remove that top cover for some reason, although I didn't find any visible screws. But when you look closely in between the LCD panel and the bottom of the computer, there's this one screw which is trying to hide. So in order to get to that one, we need to remove the 4 screws that we found earlier. And then we can kind of gently lift up this panel, and we see 2 more screws that we need to unscrew in order to get this front panel off. Or so I thought, because after unscrewing these 2 screws, I still wasn't unable to get this front cover off. Now, due to my impatience of trying to get this top cover off, I didn't see that the ribbon cable coming from the LCD panel was going through this little hole here, making it impossible for me to lift up the top cover. So I needed to look at that ribbon cable coming from the LCD panel first. And if you're thinking it's just a matter of unbolting these 2 screws here, you are mistaken, because you are unable to access these 2 screws here because the heatsink of the CPU is in its way. So we first need to remove that one. The joy of working on these old laptops. So yeah, getting the heatsink off of the CPU was pretty straightforward. I was able to lift off this top cover a bit. And here we can see the CPU. So you might be thinking that wasn't too hard, right? We can just go ahead, unscrew these 2 screws here, and Bob's your uncle, but nope. These connectors here, which hold the ribbon cable in place, are behind the CPU. So we first need to get the CPU out. So I used my trusted tweezers to gently pull the CPU out of its socket, trying to not bend any pins, which I succeeded. So yeah, that was pretty good. And here we can see our Intel Pentium 90 MHz CPU on its little daughter board that slots into the main board of this laptop. Now with the CPU removed, we can gently pull these 2 connectors up and free up the LCD panel cable. And so with the LCD display removed from the laptop, we can now finally get this top cover off, and we get a nice view of the electronics in this computer here. So we know that the laptop typically doesn't start when you press the power on button. You see some flickering on the LEDs here, but the computer doesn't really do anything. Now this isn't always the case, because like 1 out of 50 times you will be able to start the computer. It's just pretty random behavior. As you can see now, when I press the power button, you can hear the hard drive spinning. And there's actually life still in this computer, because I've hooked it up to an external monitor now, because obviously I don't have the LCD display anymore. And I noticed that the computer was booting fine. So yeah, definitely some kind of issue that we need to tackle here. Now I've found that this type of random behavior is not the easiest thing to debug. So yeah, pressing the power button just doesn't seem to do anything. Now we do see the power LED going on, but other than that, nothing happens. Let's see what we can find out and start by disassembling the PC a little bit further, because I want to see what's behind this daughter board here, what the status of the battery is, if there isn't too much leakage. So yeah, let's first get this daughter board out. Again, connected here. I'm just going to be leaving it for now so that I can access the battery here. And this is the battery which is used by the computer for, retaining its state when it goes into suspend mode. So this is a 7.2 volt battery. It's a rechargeable battery, as you see a lot in these types of laptops, and they're basically used to maintain the RAM state when you suspend the machine, and when you restore the machine again, it just comes back to life just where you left it off. So yeah, there's definitely some leakage here, as you can see in the connector, but it's not too bad. So don't think that it caused that much damage on the motherboard. I did notice here around these capacitors that there was like this dried up stuff. I think this is dried up glue. I don't think that these capacitors have started leaking. But yeah, you definitely can't rule out these capacitors that might have gone bad. It's not just because you don't see something visually that the capacitors might not be in need of replacement. So yeah, I did clean up all of that stuff on the motherboard, but the computer still wouldn't boot, obviously, because we haven't fixed anything yet. So yeah, we're left with a pretty, randomly behaving machine where most of the time it doesn't work, and then sometimes the machine is brought to life by the power button. Making it very difficult to see what's actually happening with this laptop here. Okay, so let's power up the machine again, or at least try to, and do some measurements with the multimeter. So there are a couple of caps here, and I measure 5 volt on this one and 1.9 on the other one. Now when I press the power button, I see it going up to 5 volt, and it attempts to start. You can hear the drives initializing. And all of a sudden it just stops. And we see the voltage dropping. So where we had 5 volts before, we now again see it kind of fluctuating. So with the machine turned off, it's really fluctuating the voltage here on this cap. So if I try to start it again, it goes up to 5 volts. We hear the machine starting. And then after a couple of seconds, it will probably just shut down like it does here. And again, you see the kind of voltage fluctuating. Now we can also measure the CPU voltage on this cap right here. And normally this should measure 2.9 volts, which is the nominal voltage of the CPU. And we see it going up to 2.9 volt, but it's not able to maintain that voltage. So the machine just shuts down. And when the machine is actually running for a prolonged period due to some miracle, we do see rather clean voltages on the caps here on this daughter board, and also on the CPU itself. When we measure the voltage there, we see a clean 2.9 volts, allowing the machine to basically work the way it should. Now I also removed this PCB here on the top right, which contains the PCMCIA interface. So there's a Cirrus Logic chip here for the PCMCIA controller, and we have the Creative Vibra 16 sound card on this board. That's why we also have lots of capacitors there for the sound output, I imagine. I removed this PCB because I wanted to make sure that that wasn't causing any issues, but I had the same results. So yeah, I'm just going to take the entire PCB out of the case and see if we can find any other issues with it. Perhaps there are some traces that might need to be looked at. Obviously, the battery did cause some damage, so I'm going to take a closer look at that. So yeah, in the next video, I am going to be replacing the caps, starting with the electrolytic capacitors here on the DC input side, as well as the capacitors on the CPU board. So yeah, as I have to wait on the arrival of some parts, I'm going to leave it for now. There's definitely going to be a part 2 on this laptop because I do want to get it up and running. I want to get it back into its stock configuration. I want to see it running Windows for Workgroups again with a stock configuration and hopefully bring it back to life again. So that's it for now. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.